Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into a topic that's been generating a lot of buzz, green and sustainable investing.
And it really is more than just a passing trend.
It sure seems like it. I mean,
Yeah.
more and more we're seeing how people are looking to make their money work for them, but also, like, do some good in the world at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because we've got a ton of research and articles here, and they all seem to point to the same idea, the idea that you don't have to choose between profits and sustainability anymore.
Like, you can actually do both.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So, like, what's driving this big change? What's making it all possible?
Well, it's kind of like a few different things all happening at the same time. Like, on one hand, consumers are really starting to demand eco-friendly products.
Right.
And on the other hand, you've got governments who are stepping in with all these policies and incentives to encourage green practices.
Makes And then, of course, you've got investors who are starting to realize, hey, there's actually a lot of money to be made in this whole sustainability thing.
So it's like everyone's finally on the same page.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so let's break it down a bit. When we talk about this whole green and sustainable investing thing, what exactly are we talking about? Like, what should our listeners be looking for?
Well, one term you'll hear a lot is ESG investing,
ESG. Okay.
which stands for environmental, social, and governance.
Okay.
And it's basically a framework for looking at how committed a company is to sustainability, across those three areas.
Right, ESG. I get it. So how about an example? I mean, how does a company actually put ESG into practice?
Okay, so let's imagine a clothing company, right?
Okay.
And they want to improve their environmental impact, their E rating.
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe they start using recycled materials or cut back on their water usage when they're making clothes.
Okay.
Or maybe they even invest in renewable energy to power their factories. Gotcha. So that's the E. What about the S, the social side of things?
Right, so the S could be things like making sure they have fair labor practices throughout their whole supply chain.
Okay.
So, paying their workers a living wage, offering good and safe working conditions.
So basically treating their employees well and investing in the communities where they do business.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And what about the G, good governance? What does that look like in the real world?
Well, think about things like transparency.
Okay.
Ethical leadership, responsible decision-making at the top levels of the company.
So like a diverse board of directors,
Yeah.
clear rules against corruption, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And being accountable, not just to shareholders, but to all their stakeholders.
Makes sense. So basically, if our listeners looking at a company, strong ESG performance across the board would be a good sign. Okay.
Likely.
Awesome. So now let's dive into some of the specific sectors where we're seeing a surge in these green investments, like renewable energy, for example. That's booming right now.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you see solar panels everywhere these days, and electric cars are becoming way more common. What's driving all this growth?
Well, a big factor is the cost. Renewable energy technologies have gotten a lot cheaper over the years.
So solar and wind are getting closer to the cost of fossil fuels.
Right. Which
Right.
makes them, like, way more attractive.
Both for the environment and for our wallets,
Oh,
right?
exactly. Plus, it seems like governments are finally starting to get serious about climate change.
Right.
And, they're starting to put some real policies in place to encourage the switch to clean energy.
Like what kinds of policies?
Well, a good example is Europe. They've been way ahead of the curve on this.
Uh-huh.
They've got really strict rules about emissions and ambitious goals for renewable energy.
Which has been great for companies working in that space, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's created this huge market for solar and wind power.
And it's not just happening in developed countries.
Right. Our research shows that developing economies like India and Brazil are also investing heavily in renewables.
It seems like they see it as a way to meet their growing energy needs, but also address the whole climate change thing.
Yeah, and they want to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, too.
So it's like a win-win for them.
Absolutely.
Now, we can't talk about renewable energy without mentioning Tesla, right?
Oh, of course not.
I mean, they've really changed the game when it comes to electric vehicles.
Totally. They've shown that electric cars can be like high performance, stylish, and actually desirable.
Yeah, they've really busted that myth that electric cars are boring and slow, right?
Exactly. And you know what? That's had this huge ripple effect throughout the entire car industry.
So now everyone's trying to catch up.
Oh, yeah. All the big car companies are scrambling to make their own electric models.
They don't want to be left behind.
Nope. And this is great for investors, right? I mean, the electric vehicle market is just going to keep growing.
So if our listeners are looking for a sector with huge potential, Electric vehicles and renewable energy are good bets.
Excellent.
Now, moving beyond just clean energy, there's another area that's getting a lot of attention in sustainable investing,
Yeah.
and that's water.
Oh, yeah. Water's huge.
I mean, with the growing population and climate change, finding solutions to water scarcity is super important.
Absolutely crucial.
But I hadn't really thought of water as an investment opportunity before.
Well, there you go.
What kind of companies were we talking about here?
Well, think about things like water technology,
Okay.
conservation, purification, companies that are finding innovative ways to manage water more efficiently.
So making the most of what we have and cleaning up what we've used.
Exactly.
Got it. Can you give us an example?
Sure. One company that our research highlights is Xylem. They're global, and they do all sorts of stuff with water. Water transport, treatment, testing, making things more efficient.
So they're helping to tackle this problem of water scarcity head on.
Yeah, and that's a huge market with a lot of potential for growth.
It's amazing to see how investing in solutions for these global problems can be both good for the planet and good for your portfolio, right?
Right.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about agriculture. It's another sector that's ripe for disruption,
Oh, for sure.
but it's also facing some serious challenges.
Mm.
I mean, climate change, soil degradation, water scarcity, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot. But there's also this wave of innovation happening. New sustainable practices and technologies are popping up everywhere.
Like what? What are some examples?
Well, one that's getting a lot of attention is vertical farming.
Vertical farming, okay.
Basically, it's growing crops in these stacked layers.
Stacked layers.
Yeah, often indoors in controlled environments.
So it's like high-tech indoor farming.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool.
And it means you can grow food year-round. You use way less water, no pesticides.
Wow. So it's really efficient.
Super efficient. And, a lot of investors are seeing it as the future of food.
Okay.
What else is there?
Another big one is lab-grown meat. Lab-grown meat. Whoa, that
Yeah.
sounds futuristic.
It is. It's about making meat from animal cells, but in a lab.
So no need to raise animals.
Exactly.
Wow.
Which has huge potential for the environment,
Yeah.
and for animal welfare.
Are there companies actually doing this already?
Oh, yeah, tons. Like, Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, they're making plant-based meat alternatives that are surprisingly good.
Yeah, I've heard they're getting really good.
And then you have companies like Memphis Meats and Mosa Meat. They're working on actual meat, from animal cells.
So it's like the future of food is here.
It's pretty wild.
It is wild. All right, let's talk about another concept that's gaining traction, the circular economy.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
I've heard the term, but I'm not totally clear on what it means.
So basically, it's about moving away from that whole take, make, dispose model that our economy is built on.
Right.
The circular economy is all about keeping resources in use for as long as possible. So you design products to last longer, to be repairable, and you minimize waste by recycling and upcycling.
So closing the loop.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And I'm guessing there are some big investment opportunities there too.
Oh, tons. Companies that are developing recycling technologies or designing products specifically for this circular model, those are attracting a lot of attention from investors.
Can you give us an example?
Sure, there's Loop Industries. They're doing some really interesting work. They've figured out how to break down PET plastic, like from bottles and packaging, and they can turn it back into virgin quality PET that can be used again.
So instead of that plastic ending up in a landfill or in the ocean,
Yeah.
it's like a valuable resource again.
Exactly. And that's just one example of the amazing stuff happening in the circular economy. It's a sector with massive potential for growth and for making a real impact.
This is all super exciting, but I do have to ask, are there any downsides to green investing? Like anything our listeners should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we always want to be realistic.
Totally.
So one challenge is that it can be kind of tricky to evaluate how sustainable a company really is.
Oh, how so?
Well, ESG metrics, they're still relatively new. There isn't really one standard way to measure them.
So it's not as easy as just looking at their financial numbers.
No, not really. And you'll find that different rating agencies will give different scores.
Okay.
And then there's always the risk of greenwashing.
Greenwashing.
Yeah, that's when a company tries to make themselves look more sustainable than they actually are.
Oh, just to attract investors.
Exactly. So it's really important to do your homework.
So how can our listener avoid falling for that?
Well, look for companies that are transparent,
Okay.
ones that give detailed reports about their environmental and social initiatives, and check if anyone independent has verified their claims.
So like a third-party audit.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask questions either.
Yeah, good point.
You can reach out to the company directly or talk to a financial advisor who specializes in this stuff.
Okay, great advice. Now let's talk about another area where green investing is making a big impact. Real estate. Now,
Mm.
I'll admit, when I think about sustainability, I usually think about solar panels or electric cars.
Yeah, I get.
But buildings, how do those fit into the picture?
Oh, sustainable real estate is huge and it's growing fast. And it's not just about making eco-friendly buildings, it's bigger than that.
Okay.
It's about creating spaces that are energy efficient, use water wisely, are healthy for the people who live or work there.
So it's about the whole life cycle of the building, from design to operation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And a good example of this is LED certification.
Okay.
It stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design.
Got it.
And it's this globally recognized rating system for green buildings. They set standards for everything, energy use, water efficiency, air quality, the materials they use.
So these buildings are designed to minimize their impact on the environment
Right.
and to make sure the people inside are healthy and comfortable.
Exactly. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that these green buildings actually cost less to operate.
Makes sense.
And they're worth more, and the tenants are happier.
Yeah, I mean, people are way more aware of their surroundings these days, right?
Totally.
So it makes sense that they'd want to live and work in healthier, more sustainable spaces.
And for investors, that means a more stable and profitable investment.
It's like a win-win for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, this is all incredibly interesting. So far, we've been talking about individual companies and specific sectors, but I'm sure some of our listeners might be feeling a bit overwhelmed. Like, how do I actually get started with this?
Yeah, it can be a lot to take in.
Right. Are there simpler ways to get involved without having to research every single company?
Oh, absolutely. That's where green mutual funds and ETFs come in.
Right. We mentioned those earlier.
Yeah, remember those diversified portfolios?
The ones that pool money from a bunch of investors.
Exactly.
Okay, remind us how those work.
So basically, they offer a much simpler way to get started because they're managed by professionals who pick the investments and take care of everything.
So you don't have to pick individual stocks or bonds yourself.
Yep.
That's a lot less intimidating.
It is. So it's a good option for people who want to invest sustainably but don't have the time or expertise to do all that research on individual companies.
But you still need to do some research, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to just pick a green fund randomly.
No, that's true. You still need to look into the fund's strategy, its track record, the fees they charge, and really important, the actual companies they invest in.
So whether you're doing it yourself or going with a fund, research is key.
Always.
Now, I know we've talked about a lot, but let's wrap up this part by talking about one more sector that's really taking off the electric vehicle revolution.
Oh, yeah. We can't leave that one out.
I mean, it's amazing how fast electric cars have gone from being like a niche thing to being everywhere.
It really is.
What's driving this rapid adoption?
Well, the tech has improved a ton, for one. Electric vehicles are getting better ranges, faster charging, better performance overall.
Right, and the price of batteries has come down a lot too.
Exactly, which makes them more affordable for the average person.
And of course, we can't forget about the environmental benefits.
Oh, yeah. Zero emissions. That's huge.
And seems like governments are really getting on board too, right?
Yeah, they're offering all kinds of incentives like tax breaks and subsidies.
To encourage people to make the switch.
Exactly.
So it really feels like all the stars are aligning for electric vehicles.
They really are.
And of course, that creates a massive opportunity for investors.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Tesla's been the big name, but what about other companies? Are there other players in the EV market that our listeners should know about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the traditional car companies are getting in on the action.
Like Ford, GM, Volkswagen, all those kind of...
They're all pouring money into electric vehicles, releasing new models all the time.
It seems like they've realized that the future is electric, and if they don't adapt, they're going to get left behind.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the cars themselves, right? There are all these companies developing batteries, charging infrastructure, all the supporting tech.
Oh, tons of opportunities there.
So whether you're interested in the cars themselves or the infrastructure that makes them work, there are ways to get involved in this electric vehicle revolution.
Absolutely.
And this revolution, it really speaks to a bigger point about sustainability in general.
How so?
It's not optional anymore, you know. It's a necessity.
Yeah, you're right.
As we face all these environmental challenges, it's clear that companies and investors have to make sustainability a top priority.
Absolutely. And this whole transition to a greener economy, it's already happening.
It is.
And the companies that are embracing this change, the ones developing these innovative solutions, those are the ones that are going to succeed in the long run.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about positioning yourself for success down the road.
Exactly. It's about aligning your investments with this vision of a better future, one where the economy thrives and the environment is protected.
That's a powerful idea. And it's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, good.
I mean, we've covered a lot of ground in terms of what green investing is, but now, in the next part, we're going to talk about how to actually do it, how our listeners can actually put these ideas into practice with their own portfolios.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
So in the last part, we explored all these exciting sectors that are like booming in the green and sustainable investing world. But now let's get down to brass tacks. How can our listener actually put their money where their mouth is, so to speak?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Like, it's one thing to understand all these concepts, but it's another to actually take action.
Totally.
So let's say our listener's ready to dive in. What's the first step?
Well, I imagine it starts with figuring out what's important to them, right? Like, what are their priorities when it comes to sustainability? Exactly. It's all about aligning your investments with your own values and goals.
Right.
So are you passionate about clean energy, social justice, protecting biodiversity?
Yeah. Figuring out what really resonates with you, that's got to be the starting point, right?
Totally. That'll guide all your investment decisions.
Okay, so once you've done that soul searching,
Yeah.
what are the actual steps to start investing sustainably?
Well, there are a few different approaches, each with its own pros and cons.
Okay.
One option, as we've already talked about, is investing directly in companies.
So like doing your research, picking companies that are leading the way in sustainability?
Yeah, exactly. And then buying their stock.
Okay.
This gives you a lot of control, and if you pick the right companies, you have the potential for really high returns.
Right.
But it also takes more time and effort. You got to really vet each company, analyze their ESG performance, understand their business model.
So it's more hands-on.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that sounds like a good option for someone who's really passionate about a specific company or sector and has the time to do all that research. But what about the rest of us who might not have that kind of time or expertise? Are there simpler options?
Oh, absolutely. That's where green mutual funds and ETFs come in.
Right. Those diversified portfolios we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay, so remind us how those work again.
So basically, you're pooling your money with other investors, and it's all invested in this basket of sustainable companies.
And it's managed by professionals, right?
Yeah, so it's a lot more hands-off.
Okay. That sounds a lot more manageable.
It is. You don't have to pick individual stocks or bonds. You just invest in the fund and let the experts do their thing.
But even with these funds, there's still some research involved.
Right.
You don't just want to blindly pick any green fund.
No, that's true. You
No.
still need to do some due diligence. Look into the fund's investment strategy, their track record, the fees they charge, and really importantly, check out the actual companies they're holding in their portfolio.
So no matter what, research is always key.
Yeah, it's essential.
What are some good resources or tools that our listener can use to help them make those informed decisions?
Well, there's a great organization called the Forum for Sustainable and Responsible Investment, or USF.
USF.
They've got tons of information on sustainable investing, research reports, educational stuff, and even a directory of investment professionals who specialize in this area.
That sounds like a great place to start.
Yeah, it is. Now, if you're specifically looking to evaluate a company's ESG performance, remember we talked about greenwashing?
Oh, yeah. When companies try to make themselves look more sustainable than they actually are.
Exactly.
So how do you avoid that trap?
Well, there are independent ESG rating agencies like MSCI and Sustainalytics.
Okay.
They basically provide these in-depth assessments of companies' environmental, social, and governance practices.
So they're like the watchdogs of sustainability.
Yeah, pretty much. They use these standardized metrics to evaluate companies across different sectors, which can be really helpful for investors.
So instead of just taking a company's word for it, you can get a more objective view of how they're actually doing.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are some great resources for research. But what about actually managing your sustainable investment portfolio? Are there any platforms designed for that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are platforms like Open Invest and Swell Investing that are specifically focused on impact investing.
Okay.
You can build your own personalized portfolio that's aligned with your values.
Cool.
You can track the impact of your investments and even get involved in shareholder advocacy.
Wait, shareholder advocacy. What's that?
So basically, it means using your power as a shareholder to push for greater sustainability within the companies you're invested in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you might be able to vote on shareholder resolutions, submit questions to company management, or even join forces with other investors to advocate for change.
So it's like taking your activism to the next level,
All right.
using your investments to drive real change.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just financial returns and thinking about the bigger picture,
I love that.
the impact your investments can have.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of practical tips and resources here. Is there anything else our listeners should keep in mind as they start this sustainable investing journey?
Yeah, one thing to remember is that sustainable investing is a long-term game.
Okay.
It's about investing in companies and projects that are building a better future. And that kind of transformation takes time.
So it's not about getting rich quick. It's about making investments that will have a lasting positive impact.
Exactly.
Got it.
And this long-term perspective, it's crucial for weathering the ups and downs of the market and staying focused on your goals.
That's a really good point.
Hmm.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a hot new sector or company, but we need to remember that sustainability isn't a fad. It's a fundamental shift in how we do business and how we invest.
Absolutely. And just like with any investment strategy, diversification is key. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Spread your investments across different sectors, asset classes, and geographic regions.
Okay, that makes sense. So I have to ask, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you hear about sustainable investing? Like, what are some of the myths that you find yourself debunking all the time?
Oh, there are a few. One big one is this idea that sustainable investing means sacrificing returns.
Oh, like you have to choose between doing good and making money.
Yeah, exactly. But as we've been talking about, that's just not true anymore. A lot of sustainable companies are actually outperforming their traditional counterparts.
Wow. So you can do well by doing good.
You got it. Another misconception is that sustainable investing is only for rich people.
Like you need a massive portfolio to make a difference.
Yeah, but that's a myth too.
Okay.
With things like fractional shares, micro-investing platforms, and those green mutual funds and ETFs we talked about, sustainable investing is becoming much more accessible.
So you don't need to be a millionaire to get started.
Nope. You can start small and build up your investment as you learn and get more comfortable.
That's great to hear.
Another misconception is that it's too complicated, too confusing.
Yeah, I can see how people might feel intimidated by all the jargon and stuff.
It's true, there's a learning curve. But the key is to just start with what you know, what you're passionate about, and build from there. There are tons of resources out there to help you learn and make good decisions.
So don't let fear hold you back.
Exactly. Even small steps can make a big difference.
I love that. And remember, every investment you make, big or small, it's a vote for the kind of future you want to see.
That's a great way to put it.
And it leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, cool.
We've talked about what green investing is and how to do it, but now we're going to look ahead. What's next for this movement? How is it going to reshape the global economy? Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've covered the what and the how of green and sustainable investing. Now, let's get a little futuristic. What's next for this whole movement? Where do we go from here?
Well, it's a pretty exciting time to be thinking about the future of this stuff.
It really does feel like things are changing fast.
They are, and the momentum is incredible. I mean, everything seems to be pointing toward a future where sustainability is just like built into the global economy.
So what are the big trends that are shaping that future? What can our listeners expect to see happening in the next few years?
Well, one thing that's already happening is this rise of conscious consumerism,
Okay.
especially among younger generations. Millennials and Gen Z, they really care about where their money goes.
Right.
They want sustainable products. They want companies to be ethical. And they're not afraid to call companies out if they're not doing enough.
It's like they're voting with their wallets.
Exactly. And companies are starting to get the message.
Makes sense.
They're realizing that ignoring sustainability is just bad business.
So it's not just about PR anymore.
Nope. Sustainability is becoming a core part of their strategy. And this change is being driven by both consumer demand and government regulations.
Right. We've talked about those policies, like the ones in Europe.
Yeah.
Are we seeing more of that kind of stuff happening globally?
Oh, yeah, totally. Governments everywhere are realizing how urgent this climate change thing is, and they're stepping in with policies to encourage this transition to a low-carbon economy, which creates a better environment for green businesses and drives innovation.
So it's like this positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Consumers demand change, governments create policies, and companies innovate.
Yep. And it all feeds into itself. And as this shift happens, the big investors are taking notice.
The big investors, you mean like the huge pension funds and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Those institutional investors, they're starting to realize the financial risks of climate change.
So it's not just about ethics for them.
Right. They're seeing it as a financial risk too. And they're starting to move their money into more sustainable investment.
That's a big deal, right? I mean, when those big players start moving, it sends a strong signal to the whole market.
It does. It means sustainability is going mainstream. It's not just about individuals making ethical choices anymore.
It's becoming just how business is done.
Exactly. And all that money coming in from these big investors, that's helping to drive down the cost of renewable energy, clean technologies, all that stuff.
So it's like a win-win, right? More investment leads to lower costs, which leads to more adoption.
Exactly. It's a virtuous cycle. And as this transformation happens, we're going to see a lot of new and innovative financial products and services popping up.
To cater to this growing demand for sustainable investments.
Exactly. We've talked about green mutual funds and ETFs, but there's a lot more happening too.
Like what? What else is out there?
Well, one interesting area is green bonds.
Green bonds.
Okay. These are bonds specifically designed to finance projects that have environmental or climate benefits.
So instead of investing in a company's whole operation, you can target your investment towards specific projects.
Exactly. Like you could invest in a new solar farm or a sustainable water treatment facility.
Wow. So you can really directly support the causes you care about.
Yep. And the green bond market is growing like crazy.
Yeah,
It's attracting a lot of investors who want to make money and make a difference at the same time.
makes sense. What else is there?
Another area that's really taking off is impact investing. We touched on it a bit earlier.
Right. It's about making investments that have a positive social or environmental impact, not just financial returns.
Exactly. It's about using your money to make the world a better place, not just make yourself richer.
And it's not just for individuals, right?
Nope. Foundations, big institutions, they're all getting involved in impact investing.
It's amazing to see how the investment world is changing to offer more options for people who want to use their money for good.
It really is. And as all these trends continue, I think we're going to see this blurring of the lines between traditional investing and sustainable investing.
Like sustainability will just become how everyone invests.
Yeah, pretty much. It'll just be baked into every decision.
Okay, so what does all this mean for the big picture? How is this shift going to impact the global economy as a whole?
Well, for one thing, it has the potential to create a lot of economic growth and new jobs.
Okay.
As we transition to a low-carbon economy, we're going to need all sorts of new technologies, infrastructure, and services.
We've already seen that happening in renewable energy, right?
Yeah,
Lots of new jobs being created in solar and wind.
exactly. And that's just going to continue.
Got it.
Think about energy efficiency, sustainable transportation, green building, the circular economy, all that stuff. It's going to create a ton of opportunities.
So it's like a green economic boom.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's not just about creating jobs. Investing in sustainability can also help reduce risks and make our economies more resilient.
Resilient to what?
Well, think about climate change, resource scarcity, all those global challenges we're facing. Investing in things like sustainable infrastructure, resource efficiency, and climate adaptation, that can help protect us from the worst impacts of those things.
So it's about protecting ourselves and future generations.
Exactly. And one more thing, I think the shift towards sustainability has the potential to create a fairer and more inclusive world.
How so?
Well, if we prioritize investments in underserved communities, in businesses that are trying to solve social and environmental problems, we can create a more just and sustainable society for everyone.
That's a powerful vision. It's about recognizing that sustainability is not just about the environment, it's about creating a better world for all of us.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. The choices we make today as investors, they have the power to shape the future. By investing in companies and projects that align with our values, we can help build a world where sustainability isn't just a dream, it's a reality.
That's a great message to end on. It's a reminder that we're not just bystanders. We can use our investments to make a difference. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of green and sustainable investing. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little inspiring.
And remember, this journey towards a sustainable future is ongoing. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep investing in the change you want to see in the world.
Thanks for listening, everyone.